right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for your interest. This talk is going to be about quite sensitive issues connected to the digital revolution. So if you feel unsure whether that's the right talk for you, I recommend you perhaps not to follow it. We don't want to have any complaints, but also if there's some issues that you'd like to discuss, we can do that during the talk or afterwards, okay? Chatham House rules apply to this talk. So I'm going to talk about Nano-Bio-Cyfrowe-Neuro, opportunities and threats of convergent technologies related to what we call actually the Society 5.0. And so what is the Society 5.0? It's basically an extension of the Industry 4.0 towards a new model of society. And so in order to understand what is ahead of us, perhaps, we need to understand what Industry 4.0 is about. And this is about cyber-physical systems. So it's claimed that we've seen basically 4 industrial revolutions. The first one was about mechanization, the second one on mass production, the third one on computers and automation, the fourth one on cyber-physical systems. So that is the one that's going to reshape our society, as many people claim. And if you look into Wikipedia, as many people do, then you'd find some more background about the fourth industrial revolution. And you can see it has to do with industrial capitalism and, technologically speaking, with artificial intelligence, gene editing, and advanced robotics. Perhaps gene editing is the most surprising part of it. And it's being promoted by the World Economic Forum, among others. And so if you look for brochures and books about the Society 5.0, you see this. So we basically started with the hunter-gatherer society. Then we entered the agrarian society, which was followed by the industrial society. And then came the information society. And what is projected to happen is a new society to follow this. And so this is going to do with Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, and robotics, among others. We'll see there's actually more to it. And here I've highlighted a sentence. The society of the future will be one in which new values and services are created continuously, making people's life more conformable and sustainable. Conformable should probably have been spelled comfortable, but actually, as it turns out, the word has some truth to it. And we need to be concerned about that part. Here are some books about the Society 5.0 in case you want to read more about it. So we're basically coming from an age of big data, and you've all seen pictures like this that illustrate how much data is actually being amassed in just 1 minute. In the meantime, of course, it's a lot more than that. And already back in 2013, CIA Director Gus Hunt said, "You are already a walking sensor platform." And it is really very nearly within our grasp to be able to compute on all human-generated information. You've probably no idea what all human-generated information means. In the course of my talk, I think you'll get a new perspective on that. But big data is interesting for several reasons. You can make a lot of money, knowledge is power, and many other reasons make people collect a lot of data. And there is this hope that one day we could actually know everything. We could understand the human body, brain, and personality just by mining data that would basically reveal the truth. And while data would be kind of the new oil, a new raw material, artificial intelligence would be the motor running on that new oil in a sense. And that has many promises, of course. We can do a lot of good things with it. I don't deny that at all. And of course, we should be making good use of big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence. But there are also a couple of issues that we need to think about and talk about. And this includes, for example, privacy, because the data is being collected largely by mass surveillance and related techniques and technologies, and it's being used to score people, and also it's being used for targeting. And so basically people are worried that basically privacy would get lost. Actually, how much privacy is left, I think we'll get a better idea of it in the course of my talk. Already many years back, a company called Crystal Knows was distributing this ad, the app that tells you anyone's personality. So we could basically look up people you knew or people you didn't know and could figure out what kind of personality they have. So basically, technology has been spying on us for a long time, and it's much more intrusive than many people thought. But now is basically a new level of data harvesting that comes about by the use of the Internet of Things. So basically, cheap sensors that can measure everything almost would be distributed in our environment, thousands, millions, billions, perhaps trillions of them, as we'll see later on. And those sensors would be connected somehow to the internet or read out data or help to read out data, as in the case of nanosensors. And that data would all be collected, processed, and a lot of things would be done with that data. And already many years back, smartphones had a lot of those Internet of Things sensors in them, including microphones, of course, and cameras, but also accelerometers, gyroscopes, magnetometers, and so on and so on. And in perspective, the things around us would be getting smarter and smarter. They would be equipped with sensors. Basically, that would give them senses, and they would also be connected to the internet, and that would allow us to give them some smartness, some, in a sense, processing and almost thinking capacity in perspective. And that is probably something that you did expect, but also gene editing is becoming really a big field, and that could actually change a lot, as we'll see later on. We also have a situation where there are now pills that contain nanoparticles that can actually send data out, can be collected by your doctor or by some company. And just imagine what becomes possible by this. So basically, we can look inside the body and figure out what's going on there. And people are also talking about tiny robots, so-called nanorobots, that could perhaps be used to interfere with processes in the body, for example, to fight diseases such as cancer. And so there are great perspectives if that works. But of course, if such a system would be hacked, that wouldn't be very good, I would think. And I'd like to mention one more basic technology, which is up to genetic control, for example, of RNA function and metabolism. And this is kind of interesting. And we'll probably have to think about this more. Optogenetic control means basically that light is being used to switch functions of genes. And so the question, what kind of light would it be? And could perhaps also be LED, or it could be laser light. And so we will have a new kind of internet. Wi-Fi would be replaced by Li-Fi, light-based information transmission, and we would perhaps also have new kinds of satellites. Some people have called them sun simulators that would process incredible amounts of data. You could probably not imagine even. And then the question is how to process all that data. And here quantum computers come into play, because otherwise it would not be possible anymore to handle all that massive amounts of data. I mean, really unimaginable amounts of data, I would say. So what would this be used for? Basically for a data-driven cybernetic society. There could be different versions of them, but each of those versions would basically use a lot of data to control the processes in the system and the system itself. There could be democratic versions of this, there could be communistic versions of it, there could be fascist versions of it, there could be totally new kinds of digital societies that could be realized. And I'll talk about some variants. And you will have to figure out yourself, basically, whether you find it concerning or not, or what part you find concerning, or what are the potential good uses and bad uses, or uses, or dual uses, or abuses or misuses. And certainly, we need to talk also about smart cities, because those are really good examples of cyber physical systems, where physical systems are fused together with cyber systems. A lot of cities now that call themselves smart cities. Unfortunately, in many cases, we don't know much about the details. And that is quite concerning for a democracy that should be transparent about what's going on and how our taxpayers' money is being used. So smart cities would consist of smart homes, smart grids, smart meters, smart cars, and everything would get smart, from trams, public transport, even waste disposal. And so the question comes up, could cities eventually be run like a huge machine? And this kind of idea has been around for some time, between the lines at least, because one major goal of smart cities is automation. So societies would be automated. Societies might be run by single companies, like a company, perhaps. And there are many issues in that relation, because cities are not machines, I would say. They're not a company. And they're not just a supply chain. They're also not just entertainment parks. But in any case, many cities are experimenting with their citizens. Not just Singapore, as in this case has been a detailed article about the city of Singapore, nation of Singapore. So certainly one of the well-known smart cities or smart nations. And it has also been tried, of course, in Western countries. And one of the first well-known projects was Sidewalk Labs in Toronto. And that actually was a big fail. People just didn't like it. There was too much surveillance involved. And the judgment now by some newspapers, at least Google actually tried a political coup in a sense. So it was not anymore a democratic concept of society that they tried out and implemented. And so basically that attempt failed as you can see in the title of that article, Death of a Smart City. And it's perhaps the reason why there's not much talking about other smart cities, but I think we do need to talk about it to get it right. Because also those technologies could interfere with human dignity. There are and there should be limits of automation. There are certainly issues because theoretically speaking, people could be treated like objects or like data or like animals, but we shouldn't do that. That is really violating human dignity. Human dignity must be respected, and that requires that we don't do everything that can be done with digital technology. We need to protect human dignity because otherwise things will terribly go wrong. We can see already examples throughout the world, the rise of totalitarian technology or technological totalitarianism, as some people call it. And elements of this are, for example, mass surveillance, citizen scores that are not only used in autocratic countries, but also in many Western democracies. But there's not much talking about it. And in some countries, there are even education camps or re-education camps and things like that. So quite concerning to many people. And personally, I also find this citizen score that is carbon related quite concerning, because all those concepts basically really oversimplify humans and society and human life. And it's not appropriate to represent people by one number or a few numbers or even a lot of data. So there are many issues. Still, we have all sorts of problems ahead of us. Humanity hasn't solved many problems, including sustainability issues. We're overusing resources, it seems, at least many people say. And so we do need to reorganize many things, but the question is how. And one of those concepts that has been around is the cashless society. And in this context, one concept has become famous or infamous recently, which is called central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. And so there are a couple of issues. Not only that every transaction would be recorded and surveilled, but also that it would become possible to block any transaction by algorithms and basically control the consumption patterns and the lives of people to a large extent. And so some people are pretty concerned about it. This is not the only article on that issue, but also the third very concerning point is how digital IDs would be implemented, because that is also part of the concept. Everyone would have an EID, and there is obviously a race for establishing the EIDs because say if a company would be able to roll that out globally, they would be in control basically of humanity and of the globe. And one of those consortia that has been very much engaged towards developing a digital ID was the consortium that's called ID 2020. The Gavi Vaccine Alliance has to do with that. And so it's kind of interesting that it's now possible to combine nanotechnology and blockchains and basically create passports with that kind of technology, right? So as we'll see later on in perspective, our body would be the password and the EID. It would be our bank account, it would be our passport, and many other things. And that is perhaps fascinating, and perhaps it sounds practical and efficient, but also when it comes to human dignity and human rights, there are major issues really. And therefore, we've written this article about the promise, the false promise of the digital ID some time back. Now, if you want to understand better what I'm talking about, you really need to learn about converging technologies, something that I had to learn a lot about in recent months, because most people are just not aware of it, including many scientists and many politicians, I would say, and also the media. But it's such a big subject, and really, this is something that we need to know about, talk about, think about, and that needs to be regulated. There needs to be special governance for this, because otherwise it's going to go wrong. So what is this technological convergence about? It basically suggests that we would see the fusion of more or less all technologies that we know of, and would become digitally controllable. So computer technology would come together with communication technology and high frequency technology and software technology that would create pervasive computing. And then basically artificial intelligence would come in, and brain research and neuroscience and biotechnology, and that would all be fused. And further on, process engineering and molecular design would come in, and all of that would come together basically, and perhaps also future currently unknown technologies as well. So converging technologies have kind of three characteristics, as we suggest in a paper. Marcelo Jenka and I've written that paper recently. And so there's an increasing ubiquity and pervasive distribution of computing capabilities across both physical objects and biological organisms, talking also about our bodies. Then the erosion of a clear separation between the physical, digital, and biological domains. And finally, it's hard to detect intrusion, protect from hacking, and to manage those kind of systems. And here is one of the papers that talks about the convergence of nanotechnology, brain-machine interfaces, and artificial intelligence. So you see that neurotechnology is also one of those things that come into play over here. So technology basically will, at some point in time, start to interfere with our thinking. This is, of course, pretty interesting, but also pretty concerning. Now, this convergence of technology has many implications and many opportunities, including uses in the area of planetary health or global health. So there have been all sorts of treatises about planetary health, including this Rockefeller Lancet Commission document that you see over here, which addresses basically human health in the Anthropocene. And actually, they're not just talking about human health, but actually planetary health refers to the health of human civilization as well, and the state of the natural system on which it depends. I mean, basically everything, including our behavior and our social norms and our culture. And this is all encompassing. And from my point of view, one of the most totalitarian ideas that I've ever seen, probably the most totalitarian one, and we'll understand later on why this is the case, because this is basically interfering with our body and also surveilling it to an extent that is really unimaginable for most of us. It was even unimaginable for me a couple of months ago, I would say. But it's a big issue. So politics is talking a lot about global health, and also all sorts of organizations that care about the environment and health, and also science academies and so on. So it's a big subject, a big agenda. It's about billions, I would say hundreds, if not thousands of billions of dollars, basically. So there are many interests for this to happen. But also, I'm showing you here from one document some of the thought patterns of the people developing these kinds of concepts. Here they talk about population health. And they say, as population health management gathers momentum, it has become increasingly clear that behavioral health care must be integrated with medical care. And then they say, also included in the model are data on a person's medical, criminal justice, and socioeconomic histories. I mean, it's your life, basically. The unified data model additionally covers substance abuse and social determinants of health. I mean, probably your friendship network. Essentially, the end game is to come up with a model designed for patients that is fine-tuned to recognize evolving patterns of intersecting clinical, behavioral, mental, environmental, and genetic information. So everyone is being treated as a patient, I guess. And we're looking forward to the intersection of population health management with precision medicine. And so what is precision medicine? It's basically an attempt to personalize healthcare. And for this, you require so much data that you cannot really collect it with patient studies, but you need to have new data sources, and basically you need to collect data directly from inside the body. And so this brings us to in-body surveillance and actually potentially remote control. And the talk is about Internet of Bodies. Now, the attempt is basically to create digital twins. So basically a detailed digital representation of our body and all the processes in the body as detailed as possible. And basically, the goal is to have an exact digital twin. I cannot imagine that will ever be possible, but some people seem to believe in it. And it doesn't mean that the degree of accuracy that they can reach is already kind of mind-blowing. So the question is, how does that work? And this is based on the Internet of Nano Things, or some people talk about the Internet of Bio-Nano Things. And so basically, it's based on nanoparticles that would be distributed all over the body. What are nanoparticles? These are particles so small that they're much smaller than the diameter of a human hair, not visible to the human eye. So basically, those nanoparticles would be absorbed by our body and the body cells and the organs in our body. And some of those nanoparticles could be used to read out data. So you basically use an energy beam that goes over the body, not X-ray, but some other energy beam, and there would be data. That beam would be reflected by the nanoparticles, and it can read out the patterns. That gives information about the structure and processes within the body. But where you can read out, you can also write in. And so basically, you can not only do surveillance of processes in the body, but you can also manipulate those processes to some extent. And over here is a paper that goes into quite some detail about how this is being done and what's being done with it. So you can see over here It mentions personalized medicine, remote patient monitoring, neurotechnology, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so basically, this is interesting for neuroscience as well. And so I need to talk about the BRAIN initiative, which has been kicked off back in 2013. At that time, it was announced that $3 billion would be spent on that initiative that seeked to deepen the understanding of the inner workings of the human mind and to improve how we treat, prevent, and cure disorders of the brain. I would say including behavioral disorders, whatever they define like this. And some people would even go so far that they had this idea that one day we would be able to upload the brain to the cloud. And there would be this digital double that would have its own existence, this digital twin that I mentioned before. And in this connection, you need to know about the so-called brain activity mapping project. There is a scientific paper about it. You can see it over here, has a lot of authors, and I just read 2 sentences from the abstract, where it says, nanoscience and nanotechnology are poised to provide a rich toolkit of novel methods to explore brain function by enabling simultaneous measurement and manipulation of activity of thousands or even millions of neurons. We and others refer to this goal as the Brain Activity Mapping Project. Now, you should know that this may be already going on. And they're talking about everyone's brain. So a couple of years back, they've published this article over here where they basically stated that at that time, data, I shouldn't say knowledge, but data was doubling every 12 months. That means in 1 year only, they produce as much data as in the entire history of humanity before. I mean, all the years before, in just 1 year. But here they say in a couple of years, data would double every 12 hours. And this is just unimaginable. And it has to do with human brain indexing. So basically, there's this goal to create a human brain cloud interface. And you can see one of the articles related to this over here. So in perspective, we would live in what people call neurocapitalism, which is basically the follow-up of surveillance capitalism. Well, in surveillance capitalism, companies could more or less guess your wishes and what you're doing and what you're thinking and manipulate some of your shopping behavior and some of your other behavior. Here, basically, they would learn to read your mind and to manipulate your minds and your emotions and your thoughts, your decisions, and your behavior. And so the question is, what would it take? Would it take a brain chip that some people would perhaps go for and buy? Or wouldn't that require a chip implanted in the brain at all? So this is an interesting question, I guess. And so the question comes up, are we talking here about a distant science fiction future, or is it perhaps happening already? And it is actually hard to answer this question, but I'll give you a few hints, a few puzzle pieces, and you need to make up your mind yourself where we stand with that kind of technology, okay? So here it says brain reading tech is coming. The law is not ready to protect us, unfortunately. Now, here, and it's not the only article about this, they talk about neural dust. You know, when I was in the Silicon Valley many years, actually a few decades ago in the meantime, I spent a couple of months over there. As, they were already talking about smart dust, and the military was interested in this, basically distributing dust around the world that would allow to read out information about the environment. But I didn't imagine at that time that they would basically consider putting that dust into our body. And here they're talking about neural dust because it allows to read out neural activity. So the question is, would we see smart dust everywhere? And in fact, back at COP26, we're talking about nanosensors and digital twins in order to deliver a circular economy. So nanotechnology is apparently coming upon us, and perhaps it has been coming upon us already for some time, because this paper in PNAS, a highly prestigious journal, already identified a magnetite pollution of nanoparticles in the human brain a couple of years back. Here is an article that says there's a Spanish graphene startup that outperforms, in a sense, masked Neuralink system, which supposedly is based on a brain chip, but they just use nanoparticles basically to interact with the brain. So we're talking about nano-neurotechnology in a sense over here. So that's being called non-surgical neurotechnology. Some even call it non-invasive neurotechnology. I'm a bit skeptical about that term. And then there are a couple of things that may actually be interesting in connection with the rollout of big data technology. And so, for example, on June 13th, 2019, the World Economic Forum and the UN signed a strategic partnership framework, and that concerned in particular the area of climate change and health, and altogether the Agenda 2030, that means the sustainability agenda. A few days later, there was a patent submission about a cryptocurrency system using body activity data that was basically approved about 9 months later, it seems, in March 2020. Then in May, the Congress made a law that basically allowed contact tracing and collection of all sorts of health data. And then in June, the World Economic Forum said that tracking how our bodies work could change our lives. They were talking about the so-called Internet of Bodies here. In summer 2020, a paper was published about an Internet of Bio-Nano things for early detection of infectious diseases. And here is a system that basically uses data and scoring methods for prioritizing medical and other treatments, vaccination, and testing, and so on. And in August 2020, the World Economic Forum informed us that the Internet of Bodies is here, and that this had a couple of challenges in connection with technology governance, and I'm not aware that those challenges have actually been solved. Now, the issue is that this technology can be also used in a military way. So basically, in principle, our bodies and minds would become part of the global battlefield. And it's not only me who is basically getting concerned about it. Here are a couple of TED Talks that you may want to look at. So nanotechnology endangering the world is a question that is addressed in this talk, and that talk is about in-body surveillance, the spies inside living things. I talk about nanotechnology, and this talk about nanosensors in everyday life and their applications basically suggests that we could look into people's brains in order to figure out whether they really love a certain person or not. That means really to reveal your hidden emotions to whoever is capable of using that kind of technology. Now, put this into the context of attempts of world simulation, as we know that already for a couple of years. One of those systems called sentient world simulation. So basically, it is creating an agent-based simulation of the world where every individual is represented by an agent in that agent-based simulation. It's a massive agent-based simulation with millions or billions of agents, and each of those agents is personalized by the use of surveillance data. And it's being used also for PsyOp, among others. So basically to manipulate your thinking and your emotions. And the idea is that we could perhaps fix the world using a more or less all-powerful, all-knowing AI system. And there would be a war room approach, basically, to heal the world. I wonder what you think about that. We can hopefully discuss about it a bit later on. So
yes, Dirk, I mean, in this respect, I will let you know that, I mean, already we covered, 45 minutes. So I think you should, go towards, the conclusion.
Yeah, I'm coming to an end. So basically, the areas of future health are growing together with military applications. So you can also see that the logos are pretty similar. And to see really the priority that this kind of technology has, you should know that His Excellency Jose Barroso, who was the president of the European Commission, is now the chair of the Gavi Vaccine Alliance. And also the NATO Secretary General was actually working for this alliance a couple of years back. And so there are some papers about human body digitization and the Internet of Bodies and their use for military operations. And there are books about military neuroscience and neuro warfare and mind wars. So the question is really, is civilization being replaced by a militarization? And will we see something like nano wars? And if you listen, for example, to this panel discussion over here, you can get the impression that this is already happening. And so basically they're invisible hybrid wars that are going on around the world. And some people are even thinking about the possibility of an Internet of virus things. I'm not saying that does exist, but some people do think about it. And I do think we should be a bit concerned about it, and also about transhumanism, which basically would be the result from the perspective of some people of human-machine convergence. I mean, a result of that technological convergence that I talked about before. You know, for example, that Elon Musk wants to connect us with computers to allow us to keep up with robots. That's his idea. But he's also very much concerned, on the other hand, about AI, and that could be one of the biggest mistakes humans have ever made. Some people think man and machine, or humans and machine, women and machines, will not be distinguishable anymore in the future. Our successors will be just machines, and perhaps they would not be natural humans anymore. And Yuval Harari actually thinks humans are now, as he says, hackable animals And that is pretty shocking, but it's interesting to listen to his talks. And over here you see some talking about, that's an Academy of Science document about optogenetics, which basically looks into ways to stimulate nervous cells by genetic manipulation of those cells. Okay, and if you want to know more about it, you should probably read this document over here about human augmentation, which is by the Ministry of Defense, I think, of Canada, and also in partnership with the Bundeswehr Office of Defense Planning. Very interesting. Some people think already for some years we are seeing a transhumanist politics, and so basically that would already be going on. And so I do think we need an alternative approach, at least there is one, that is aware of the vulnerabilities that occur by converging technologies and more possibilities to hack the system. We certainly need international regulation of that kind of technology, and Marcelo Jenka and I have worked out 10 principles for converging technologies. And one such principle should be informational self-determination, which would require certain kind of platforms to allow us really to be in control of our own data. We would need neural rights. In fact, there's at least one country that has already implemented that in their legal system. And we would need to have a new approach based on responsible innovation and value-based engineering, where our constitutional and cultural values would be built into the way those digital systems work in order to strengthen them rather than undermining them. And in particular, it would be possible to digitally upgrade democracy in this way. And here's also a recent paper about this that we've written. So altogether, I think we need to also take into account the complexity of systems more, not see it as an enemy, but rather embrace complexity to our favor. In fact, we can solve that sustainability issue in a way that is compatible with democracy and human rights and with resilience, actually better compatible. And also by using the Internet of Things, but using it in a different way, in a participatory way, to map externalities like noise and CO2 and all sorts of emissions and poisons and so on, and then use this for feedbacks and incentives to increase positive externalities and reduce negative ones and ensure fair compensation. For this, we have developed an entirely new financial system that we call Finance 4, a socio-ecological finance system, a participatory framework that introduces new forces into our economy and society that would promote improvements in many places, little by little, with many different goals, and thereby trigger a co-evolution towards a circular and sharing economy. And so the question that is kind of unanswered, how it will really end, is what will society 5.0 be like? Will it be a surveillance-based, data-driven, AI-controlled, optimized society that targets people, or will it be a measurement-enabled, data-oriented, AI-supported, co-evolving society that empowers people? I think we should make sure to take the latter and the better path. With this, I'm at the end, and there's just 2 more papers that I do recommend to have a look at, which is about digital twins and their limitations. And with this, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and interest, and I hope we'll have an interesting discussion.